So scripture is generally densely packed with meaning and hyperlinked to itself. The stories are so full of meaning that they continue to reveal and reveal and reveal and deeply impact the listener. And I'm fascinated by texts that do this. Freud and Marx are examples of texts that continue to impact our thinking and being. We daily use their language without even being aware of it. These kinds of texts are referred to as grand narratives because of their broad reach and explanatory power. Freud was and is unparalleled. Freud started off in clinical medicine and then developed what he would later call the science of subjective reality. Now, I love reading Freud, about his impact, and actually wrote a long piece about his work on the nervous system and then cut it out because it was quite tangential. So summarily, his ideas continue to positively impact us. And there are loads of short and long biographies on this fascinating man. Back to today. The Bible is a collection of books with different types of literature. Each book can stand on its own, but each book is written within a context, the relationship between God and a group of people over a 1,500-year period. The stories, particularly Genesis and Job, are likely a little bit older than that. The more one reads, the more the entire narrative comes alive. And there probably are at least a couple of reasons that the text is so alive. And one is, I think, something to do with our building self-awareness over thousands of years of what's beneficial and what's not. So one wonders at the actual narrative, and then one wonders at how the writers arrived at this narrative. Even some of the wisest people alive today cannot begin to even scratch the surface of the depth of practical wisdom contained in, say, a book like James. I suppose it's easy to take our present context as the best of all worlds. Things have never been better. In many ways, that's true. And then in very definite ways, we are still very much at war with ourselves. We struggle against our depravity for something more, something better. The book of James, written by James, Jesus' brother, and James is English for Jacob. He was Jesus' sibling, and Jesus' siblings were unconvinced that he was God until he rose from the dead. After Jesus' resurrection, James then wrote his letter referencing the Sermon on the Mount and Proverbs. Like the Sermon on the Mount, it's a collection of wise sayings designed to be memorized. So of all the books, this book directly addresses how Jesus' followers should live. Enduring hardship, living out practical love, and living whole and perfect lives. There's one line out of many that's deeply affected me. For we all stumble in many ways. If someone does not stumble in what he says, he is a mature man who can bridle his whole body. That's James chapter 3 and verse 2. So I want to emulate people who are wise and who can express wisdom and live accordingly. That's probably our main aim, to seek wisdom and to live accordingly. About 20 years ago, I gave up television for Lent. On Easter, I watched TV, and the sounds and the images felt like a barrage of unwanted content. Since then, I've largely tried to cut out TV. I like being able to choose the content I take in. Since then, I've largely chosen the content that I want. And what we see and hear directly influences how we think. And passively consuming is not ideal because it wastes time and repeatedly exposes us to nonsense narratives. Nonsense narratives and time wasting, when they take root, make it hard to navigate healthy thinking, healthy relationships, healthy behaviors. I suppose this is a much longer thought, how we can easily forget ancient narratives that come about by watching and recording what happens when people behave in one way versus another. I'm talking about scripture here. One ancient truth is that people are inherently corrupt as a rule. With that as the axiomatic truth, we can aim to cultivate virtue. The point of bringing up grand narratives is that we often repeat narratives without being aware of the ideas that have taken a hold of us. It's probably ideal to choose wise narratives and to reject nonsense narratives. James is one of the pithiest of all wisdom books. Living accordingly helps to correct our internal compass. Living the way he sets out helps us navigate our relationships. Again, I'm so thankful for folk past, present, who demonstrate wisdom, generosity, faith in challenging circumstances. Father, help me emulate the wisdom and faith and love of those around me.